Don't look! Rambling about the apologetic reversal over time. Last week, my ramble touched on the place of role models in the life of a Christian. Once I'd finished writing that post, I had a stream of thoughts which were linked, but not the same. So here goes. I've been a youth worker ever since I was old enough to serve on the youth team at church. It's been a long time, over 25 years at this point. I once listened to a recording of John Piper preaching to a conference of youth workers, which in itself was funny because I'm not entirely convinced he thinks youth workers are even necessary. But that aside, it was a very memorable talk for two reasons. The first is he said something I've written in every youth team handbook ever since I heard it. The biggest battle in your youth ministry is in you, not in them. End quote. Secondly, he said, at the end of their time with you, you should be able to say, your blood is no longer on my hands. End quote. Now, whatever your thoughts are on John Piper and that tweet from over a decade ago, it is important to say that whilst John Piper is not everyone's cup of tea, he is a good preacher. And I have to say, I can still hear his voice ringing in my head just writing those words on the page. Plus his points were sharp and very valid. In fact, my own journey through youth ministry has been one which has proven his first point to be true. As the years have gone by, I have needed to change, I have needed to grow. I was the main battleground in many ways. My own thoughts, doubts, fears and failings. I remember getting asked such obvious questions that I couldn't answer adequately by genuinely earnestly seeking young people that drove me to study. That feeling of not having a good enough answer was, and is, horrible. I couldn't care less if the young person seemed satisfied with my half-baked answer to their accidentally brilliant question. I knew I had fudged it, and that would gnaw away at me. First I studied apologetics. It seemed as good a place as any to start. I loved it. I remember having the privilege of hearing Alistair McGrath speaking at a small conference at the time that he was finishing writing his biography of C.S. Lewis. He was brilliant. Such an obvious wealth of information and study, and a far richer speaker than I was used to listening to. I was hooked. Later on, I went on to do a master's degree in missional leadership, which is theology and ecclesiology in simple terms. Through Alistair, I found the Oxford Centre for Christian Apologetics, and a whole new world of Christian apologists opened up to me. I remember going on their website and just typing in the names of their speaking team into YouTube and watching whatever I found. I have listened to hundreds of hours of apologists listening down the years in the background while I work. One of the most compelling speakers I found was a man called Ravi Zacharias. He was unquestionably one of the best communicators I had ever heard. His ability to take questions unflustered from a crowd and respond with thoughtful and incisive answers with little or no notes was remarkable. I was very much a fan of his work. I took his online apologetics course, and then I took part in the online training a further 2 times as a course moderator, helping other people through that process. In May 2020, Ravi passed away and was roundly celebrated. Vice President Mike Pence called him the greatest Christian apologist of the 20th century. Sadly, this tribute couldn't have been further from the truth. Just a month after his death, Ravi's whole ministry and staff of hundreds were all pitched headlong into a fight for survival. Thanks to the tireless work of Steve Bockham, the lies and misconduct of Ravi, which had been perpetrated over years, began to unravel. It was clear that Ravi was not living the same standards he preached. He had not finished the race well. He died without repenting or giving his victims an apology. The logical apologetic move was made by most pastors and evangelists I heard was the same. Look to Jesus, not his flawed followers. And that is fair enough. Jesus himself had flawed followers. Judas literally took money to betray Jesus. It's not a new phenomenon that the followers of Jesus might not live up to the high calling they have been given. As the years have gone by, I observed many more Christian leaders fall, like Ravi did. Jean Vanier, Carl Lentz, Brian Houston, Mike Bickle, Todd White, Michael Tate, Philip Yancey and Sean Bolts most recently. All in slightly different ways, but all devastating nonetheless. The logical apologetic move made by most pastors and evangelists I heard was the same. Look to Jesus, not his flawed followers. At this point, I should point out that there are entire ministries dedicated to helping root out abuse and misconduct. Some of them are the ones which provided the evidence for the links I supplied to you. It is worth saying the obvious at this point. Any and all abuse like this has no place in the church and should be rooted out. It's painful to see things like this go wrong, but it's far worse to think of it still happening, so action must be taken. This is an important note, but not on the subject of this week's ramble, so I must continue my train of thought. 3 years ago at Christmas, I read St. Athanasius' On the Incarnation. I'd found a copy of the book which had contained the infamous introduction by C.S. Lewis commending the reading of old books and was keen to read it. I'd saved it as something to read during Advent that year. Hands down, it was the best book I read that year, and probably for many years before. In the book, there are repeated exhortations to look at the martyrs, virgins and ascetics for proof of lives truly changed by the power of the cross of Christ. The contrast couldn't have been more sharp. St. Athanasius spent a good deal of time arguing something along the lines of, look at the lives that have been changed by those who follow Jesus. What a breath of fresh air. I say fresh air, but St. Athanasius lived in the 3rd and 4th century AD. He wrote his book 1700 years ago, but his perspective is refreshing. I love the way his whole line of argument was grounded in the reality of the changed lives of the Christians who he observed walking around him at the time. He was challenging his readers to look at them, observe the clear sacrifices they had made in their lives, look at how the cross of Christ changed them and had given them new hearts. The challenge for me personally is to live a life worth looking at, to try to live faithfully and not become yet another cause for the apologist to trot out the overused "look to Jesus, not his flawed followers" line. 1 Thessalonians 4 verse 11 is not a verse you hear preached on often, but there is great wisdom in it. Aspire to lead a quiet life, mind your own business and work with your own hands as we commanded you. 1 Thessalonians 4:11. Why must everyone feel the urge to build a world-changing ministry? How about you focus a little closer to home and just focus on actually living the things you say you believe? I do sometimes wonder if we can be guilty of at times baptizing our own ambitions to try and achieve our own goals of greatness or notoriety, but using the church as a vessel for them, thus making everything okay. In my mind, many of the times we see Christian leaders go wrong, it's because they've simply baptized their own selfish ambition to be famous or live a life of consequence. But it's not just Christians who are guilty of this. You see it all around. The search for meaning and the desire to leave our mark on the world is all around us. It's the same urge that motivates Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, the Animal Justice Project and the pro-Palestine marches in London, and many more. The desire to be like those giants of our history, Martin Luther King Jr., Emmeline Pankhurst, Nelson Mandela and William Wilberforce. What can I do to add my name to the list? The reality is probably very little. Each of those characters was a once-in-a-generation figure. Each one of them is singular. They're an individual who lived lives in a particular time and place. They're not just people who filled mere job roles of primary protester at a given time. When I watch protesters march through London, I often think they see themselves to be the successors of Wilberforce or Mandela, as if, like the papacy, the authority is passed down to the next person in the queue. It is not. Just because you think you're the next Emmeline Pankhurst does not mean that you are. I'm under no illusions of being the next anything. I'm just me, and I don't want to be anyone else. If I could be so bold, I don't think you should either. I've often said that the hardest piece of scripture for any one of us to wrestle with is Matthew 5, 6 and 7. Once you have that mastered, you can move on to the rest. If you've ever read the Sermon on the Mount, you will know that there is plenty to keep you busy there for more than one lifetime within it. That brings me back to the John Piper quote at the start. The biggest battle in your youth ministry is in you, not in them. I don't need to change the world, but I do need to change. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done in me as it is in heaven. I want to be someone who, if St. Athanasius was still with us, he could point to and say, look at the changed life of those who followed Jesus. So there it is. That's the collection of thoughts that have been rambling through my mind since last week. If you have any thoughts or comments, why not share them in the comments below? If you know someone else who you think would enjoy this ramble or others like it, why not send them a link? Next month I'll be celebrating 1 year of writing weekly. It'll be nice to see how many folks have chosen to subscribe in that year. Grace and peace.